A sphere, capable of reflecting and transforming, is placed on Earth to gain experiences and be observed by its creator. It ended up falling near some stones and receiving their stimulus. It transformed into one too. A long time passed with the stone-shaped sphere, until the place began to snow. An injured and weak wolf that was on a long walk ended up dying right where the sphere was. When it received the stimulus from the wolf, it transformed into the wolf, acquiring consciousness for the first time. However, the sphere ended up reproducing the wolf's injury, but we realized that this was not a problem. It has a high regenerative capacity, and in a few seconds the wound is healed, and the sphere learns to walk, following the path that the wolf took. And guys, help us grow our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. We have a lot more exciting content coming up that you don't want to miss. So give it a thumbs up so we can beat the goal of 153 likes on this video. And now let's go. After a long walk, the sphere arrives at the wolf's destination, a place with several destroyed houses where a boy lived alone. The boy is excited to see the sphere, thinking that it was his wolf that had returned, and this boy becomes his first human contact. Inside the house, the orb increases his experiences by feeling the new warmth, sounds and smells. The next day, the boy talks to the wolf about how he would like to have gone with the rest of his people, who had left 5 years ago in search of a better place to live, and left him to take care of the old people, whom he couldn't save, being left alone with the wolf. He comments that he would like to find this place, where he knew he had sweet food, like a fruit. After catching one more fish, the only food he had, the boy starts to eat, making the sphere realize how he fed himself, eating for the first time. The boy looks at the faces drawn on the wall, his family and neighbors, drawn by him so he would not forget them. And so, he decides to go in search of the place where they had all gone to start their journey. On the way, he finds a stone with an arrow, showing the direction his people had gone, and is encouraged to realize that he was on the right path. He continues on his positive journey, finding more stones with arrows, but as the days go by, his body begins to freeze and his food gets lower and lower. To make matters worse, he ends up falling on some ice, causing him to get all wet in the freezing water, and injure himself with some branches. In spite of this, he is not discouraged and continues on with his wolf, who is observing the whole journey, picking up new experiences. But the boy grows weaker and weaker, and his wound becomes infected, until he reaches a rock, which, unlike the others, had a scratch on it showing that he should not continue. Around it were several carts with tombstones. His people were dead. This gives the boy a reality shock. He was weak and alone, talking to a wolf that didn't seem to understand. But soon he embraces the wolf regretfully, because although he didn't answer, the animal had accompanied him on this exhausting journey. Weak and desolate, he returns with his companion to his home and maintains his positivity, thinking about treating his wound and returning to his journey to find a more pleasant place with other people. But, unlike what he thought, his wound was getting worse and worse, and the boy begins to burn with fever. Even though he is sick and extremely weak, he remains hopeful that he will find other human beings, but realizing that he will not resist, he bids farewell to his companion, asking him never to forget him, and then dies. While his spirit leaves the house and meets up with the rest of his family, the sphere, receiving stimulation from the boy's body, eventually takes on its new form as a human, and goes off in search of new experiences, just as the boy wanted. However, he did not know the needs of a human, such as needing to eat and sleep, and so he ends up dying. But the sphere regenerates and comes back to life, dying several times on its journey, and each time this happened, it managed to regenerate even faster, coming back to life in a few seconds. And so he continues on his way, until he finally reaches a warmer and more habitable place, where he comes across a gigantic bear. Meanwhile, in a village called Ninana, a cute little girl named March was playing at being a mother, when Perona, her friend, arrives playing with her, followed by her parents, with her little sister on her lap. At home, March asks her parents when she will be able to become an adult to be a mother, complaining that she doesn't want to wait, since there is only her sister and one other girl of children in her village. But her parents explain that she has to wait to become an adult. Later, March plays at being a mother once again, when a bell starts ringing and Perona takes her for a game in the forest, but Hayase stops her, saying that they must reunite, and we realize that in fact Perona was trying to run away with March, unsuccessfully. Everyone in the village gathers for a shaman of the Yanome people to choose one of the 3 children for sacrifice to the god Oniguma. After the 3 are evaluated, March is chosen and everyone in the village congratulates her. The innocent girl is happy without understanding what was happening, until she arrives home and her parents begin to cry. Hayase arrives and says that she would be responsible for making sure that her sacrifice occurs as it should, and explains that after a banquet, she and her men will leave with March to the mountain, where she will be put to sleep and left as a sacrifice to Oniguma, and after 1 year, they will return there to get her remains and bring them back to her family. March is left wondering why she should die, realizing that she would never fulfill her dream of becoming an adult. But if she didn't go to the sacrifice, her little sister or her friend would be sacrificed in her place. So, Having no other choice, she follows the ritual feast and leaves for the mountain where she was to die. On the way, an arrow falls on them and March takes advantage of the distraction to flee through the forest. Clumsily, she runs for her life and ends up rolling until she falls into a lake, where she finds an eye, the eye of the sphere. It had its body destroyed and was slowly regenerating itself in an extremely bizarre and frightening way, frightening the soldiers who were running after March. She also gets scared, but ends up staying long enough to see the boy gaining an ordinary human form, and with nowhere to go, begins to follow him. Meanwhile, Perona, who had shot the arrow, is arrested and Hayase realizes what his plan was, to save March and fake his death. The soldiers then appear saying that they had seen a monster. At the same time March tries to talk to the sphere, which shows no sign of understanding. He spots a fruit, which the boy wanted to taste. March notices this and uses her ability to climb trees to give him several fruits, and he eats them all like an animal. The girl tries to show him how he should eat and thank for the food, trying to teach good manners to the boy, who still doesn't understand anything and lies down to sleep. Not having anything to do, she eats a fruit and falls asleep. March dreams she is reuniting with her parents, where everything begins happily until she sees the other children who were sacrificed after her escape, making her feel guilty and wake up scared. She leaves the boy sleeping and when he wakes up, he misses her and goes after her, starting to follow March. The girl then makes a decision to be the boy's mother and teach him good manners, giving him a name, Fushi. Meanwhile, Perona takes advantage of the guard's distraction to take a hidden knife and cut her ropes. Suddenly, everything begins to shake. The gigantic bear, the same one that killed Fushi a few days ago, appears and we discover that he is Oniguma, the creature that has offered the rituals. After the soldiers try to take a few arrows at him without seeming to have any effect, Oniguma kills one of them and the other escapes, leaving Perona alone and tied up. She quickly struggles to free herself and manages to escape at the last minute, falling over a cliff to a stop on one side. While Perona was desperately searching for March, the girl is found by Hayase and knowing she would have no other choice, she says goodbye to Fushi and goes on to her sacrifice. And so, she is given a food that puts her to sleep and she is placed on top of the mountain as an offering to Oniguma. But before they leave, March passed out. The bear arrives, almost together with Perona, who runs to save her. The soldiers go to stop it, but Hayase decides to leave them both, thinking that this way she would have two offerings. But just as they were leaving, Fushi passes by, being locked up along with Oniguma and the girls. And Hayase watches Fushi being attacked by the bear, which is still alive, regenerating itself. Fushi turns into a wolf and attacks Oniguma, who even with all his efforts, cannot get rid of Fushi. When March wakes up, Oniguma is already dead. Hayase then gives the two a choice: die right there or live in her homeland, Yanome. She also asks the soldiers to take the bear and the wolf along with them, even though they are all afraid of Fushi. But once again, March shows his innocence by throwing a fruit to the wolf, and so Fushi speaks his first word in a very strange way: thank you. On the way to the new village, Perona dreams of when she was a little girl and her sister played hide and seek with her to save her from the ritual, and when she came out of hiding, her sister had already been sacrificed. The next day, March has fun giving fruit to the wolf, who thanks her when the two realize the presence of the shaman who chose March for the ritual. The old woman explains that her people, the Yanome, do not actually believe in the ritual but rather take advantage of the Nine Anna's belief in the riches of the land. Perona, who already found this custom useless and cruel, becomes even more determined to try to put an end to the traditions of the ritual. Everyone takes a break to bathe in a lake, and there, Fushi, looking at his reflection as a wolf, remembers the boy who took care of him and asked not to be forgotten, causing Fushi to transform into the boy again. March then recognizes him and is happy to see Fushi again. After returning for their journey, they finally arrive in Yanome village and March enjoys looking at everything in the new place, until she remembers her parents and gets homesick. At this point she sees a guy saying that they deliver letters and decides to send one to her parents. However, there she finds out that her Nine Anna people don't have the culture of writing, so her parents wouldn't know how to read. But the girl does not give up and marks her hand on the sheet with ink, saying that it is written that March is fine. However, neither she nor Perona could tell the guy where her parents' house was, and since the village was very large it would not be possible to deliver the letter without a more detailed location. But Perona decides to keep the letter to deliver to March's parents as soon as possible. After they eat a good meal, we realize that Hayase's plans were not to let them live loose in the town. She puts everyone to sleep and when Fushi wakes up, he was trapped in a cell. She offers some prisoners the opportunity to be released if they kill the boy, but since he is immortal, no one stands a chance against him, and Fushi discovers a new power. After being attacked by a spear and regenerating, he creates an identifying spear and attacks the man. At the first opportunity, Fushi takes the opportunity to escape, but ends up being captured by the soldiers and left in the cell of March, who had just woken up. She takes care of him, taking out the arrow that was stuck in the wolf, and discovers that Perona was in a cell right above hers, who asks for the arrow for her. After March hands over the arrow, Fushi digs a hole, which turns out to be where Onigoma's body was. She takes pity on the animal, which has been hit several times by arrows. When Hayase shows up explaining that they would have to take care of the creature, but no one wanted to do such a thing, she notices March's presence and decides to give this task to her. And so time passes, with March tending to the dead bear's wounds, while Perona cleans up around the place, waiting for the right moment to execute her escape plan, disguise herself as one of the soldiers, with the help of an old prisoner, and escape with everyone, taking some part of the bear's body to prove to her village that they no longer needed to perform rituals. After a long time, Perona finally goes in search of executing her plan and scales with difficulty the rocks of the place, but ends up falling and being found by a soldier who tries to take advantage of the situation. But she knocks him down and goes to March with her disguise. Once there, she takes everyone, including the Lady Pyran, to a sewer exit in the room where the bear was and asks them to go ahead. March is confused, but starts to leave when she realizes that Perona was about to stab the bear with her sword. The girl is outraged at the injustice the poor animal has suffered, insisting that Perona at least respect its body after death, even as she explains that this would put an end to the rituals. After much insistence, Perona decides to respect March's choice and go on her way without harming the bear's body, with her having to think of another way to convince her people to put an end to the rituals. In the wagon, they flee from the soldiers, while March is happy to know that she will meet her parents again, not even realizing that they were being attacked. She starts talking about how she will now be able to grow up and become the adult she always wanted, when she finally notices Perona defending herself from some arrows. Hayase is chasing them and tells her that if they leave Fushi behind, she will let them go, but Perona refuses and they continue to be attacked. March is worried about her friend and decides to help, but the poor child ends up getting shot by the soldiers, saving Perona's life. As a result, Fushi becomes angry and turns into the bear to attack all the soldiers. Meanwhile, Perona, in desperation, tries to save March's life, but unfortunately she was badly injured. Then March realizes that she would not survive and asks Perona to live her dream for her and become a mother, and then dies. After carefully arranging March, Perona jumps out of the wagon with her body in her arms and explains to Fushi that he didn't have to fight anymore to protect the girl, thanking him for his help, and so he returns to his boy form and we see that Hayase was seriously injured. March imagines she is meeting her parents, with everything being resolved, and sees herself as an adult and the mother of the dolls she cared for, when she remembers Fushi and realizes that she was not an adult but the spirit of a child who had just died. She then meets with the bear spirit and realizes Fushi and Perona, who is about to kill herself, to join her. Desperate, she tries to stop her friend from doing such a thing, but being a spirit, she can do nothing. When Fushi decides to stop Perona and turns into a bear, taking her away from the soldiers, Perona realizes what he meant, for her to live even with March's death. Finally, Perona arrives in her village, riding Fushi in the form of Onigoma. Crying, the girl gives March's letter to her parents, who cannot understand what it means. Perona then translates the drawing, explaining that it meant that March was fine, and collapses crying. The parents are heartbroken to realize what it meant. Their daughter had survived the sacrifice, but was no longer alive, and thanks Perona for all she had done. Fushi turns into the boy, causing everyone to be frightened, when a man from the village explains that the Yanome were coming, and Perona, who knew they were after Fushi, asks him to run away to save himself. So he turns into a wolf and runs away to the forest, while Perona tries to hit Hayase with an arrow, but misses and hits her hand. Fushi continued in search of new stimuli, now with a little more humanity, although he spent most of the time in wolf form and sometimes transforming into the boy for no apparent reason, and other times transforming into March, to use her tree climbing abilities. And so he ends up meeting something familiar, Pyran, the lady who was still in the wagon they escaped from. At first she thinks she has met March, thinking that she is alive, but soon realizes that it was Fushi. With nowhere to go, Pyran begins to follow him and, desperate with hunger, tries to bite him, who becomes angry and climbs a tree in the shape of March and begins to throw various fruits at her, satisfying her hunger. Later, she takes a sheet of paper to write on and arouses Fushi's curiosity. She then begins to teach him some words, and so time goes by, with the two of them together and Fushi learning more and more words. After a while, on a ship, he is able to speak a few sentences and tells her his story before he met March, of the boy who transformed himself, who had taken care of him in the beginning. At night, they continue the journey to Pyran's house, where she tells him she will meet her boyfriend, and the two of them lie down to sleep in the forest to continue the journey the next day. While they are sleeping, a strange tree-shaped creature attacks Fushi, killing him and stealing his boy form. At this moment, Fushi's creator appears, stopping time to explain to him that this creature, called Knocker, was his enemy and has the ability to steal his stimuli and memories with the forms that accompanied him, having as a weak point a core in the middle of his body, which had to be torn out to be defeated. Fushi then attacks it with all his will, but no matter how close he got to the creature's core, he could not defeat it, having its form stolen, leaving only its March appearance to fight. Using the advantage of the girl's skill and size, He faces the creature, managing to reach the core and defeat it just in time to be killed again. After squeezing the core in his hands, his memories return along with his acquired forms. His creator then explains that he was meant to preserve this world, while Knocker was sent with the goal of stopping him. His creator bids him farewell, saying that he would return in the future. And so Pyran and Fushi continue on their way, finally arriving at her boyfriend's house where they meet a boy with a mask on his face, called Gugu. We learn Gugu's story. He and his brother have been working hard to save enough money for them to have a decent life. On another workday, Gugu sees a girl called Reen, who was always passing by, and we realize that he likes her, although he doesn't know her. After a hard work day, he sees his brother talking to some unknown guys and his brother quickly says goodbye. When Gugu gathers the amount he received for the day with his savings, he realizes that part of the money was missing, and since his brother says he didn't know anything about it, he thinks it's better to change the hiding place where the money was kept just in case, and invites his brother to share a muffin with him who refuses. So he goes alone to feed himself when a little dog appears and he decides to share his food with the little one. The next day, he meets up with the puppy again when he realizes that Reen owned him. She is very happy to meet her pet and to show her gratitude. She gives Gugu a valuable ring, saying that if he could sell it, he would never have to work again. Later, the boy returns to meet his brother and finds that he has left and taken all the money. And so Gugu continues his journey, alone, until one day he bumps into a man carrying some logs, and one of them almost hits him. Since the log was heavy, the man goes in search of help to get the log, leaving Gugu alone. Suddenly the log begins to move, and the boy spots a girl under the ravine, right in the direction the log was coming down. He runs to save her, pushing her to get her out of harm's way, and we see that this was Reen, but even though he saved her, the log falls on top of him. He hears people coming, but they save her and leave poor Gugu injured. After a while, an old man, Pyran's boyfriend, finds Gugu in that situation and saves him. However, when he wakes up, he is no longer the same. His face had been completely deformed, making him feel like a monster, and he had to hide his face from society with a mask. After 3 months, Pyram and Fushi show up, arriving at the current time of the story. After learning of Fushi's powers, Gugu shows him around, explaining that it was a liquor store. And so time passes with him teaching all the tasks of the store and beginning to consider Fushi as a brother, since both of them could be considered monsters in society. Until one day, Reen, the girl Gugu liked, arrives at the store looking for something to heal a wound on her arm that she had 3 months ago, the day she was saved by Gugu. He is excited to talk to the girl, but to his regret, she shows interest in Fushi. Gugu, after his regrets, decides to exercise, so that at least his body would be more attractive. Later, Gugu asks Fushi to show him some new skills. He remembers when he made a spear in his cell, and goes back to creating another one with his hand. Gugu then begins to do experiments on Fushi, hurting him to test his healing process and discovering that he reproduced the objects that caused him pain. But this hurts him, because although he heals extremely fast, no one likes to feel pain and be a lab rat. Reen comes back asking to work in the store as well, and so the next day she arrives and Gugu decides to help her get something to heal her wound, and asks the old man for help. He then takes some liquor from inside the boy to rub on Reen's wound. Confused, Gugu asks why there was liquor inside him, and the old man explains that when he healed him he took the opportunity to do an experiment, adding liquor inside his body. Outraged, he flees far away. After Reen finds out what had happened, she asks the old man to go to Gugu to apologize, but he refuses to go look for the boy. Not wanting to go after him alone, she asks Fushi to go, but he was still hurt by his friend's experiences and also refuses to go. He then takes over the chores, but everyone realizes that unlike Gugu, Fushi was terrible in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Gugu tries unsuccessfully to get the liquor out of him and decides to work hard to pay a doctor to get it out. And so, he returns to his new life, living in the shack and looking for a new job, but everyone called him a monster because of his mask. Tired of this, Gugu throws the mask away, and the next day the people are even more frightened to see his face, and begin to treat him as a circus freak. While at the old man's store, everyone misses how Gugu took care of everything, and Pyran ends up convincing Fushi to go after his friend to see how he is doing. Gugu, with not much money to live on, finally remembers the ring that Reen gave him before his accident and decides to sell it. However, he eventually gives up on the idea, since that ring was one of the few things left from the time when he was not called a monster. Suddenly, he sees an extremely thin and weak boy passed out in an alley. It was his brother who had abandoned him. Gugu then leaves the ring with him, thinking that with the amount of the ring, he could change his life, unlike him who would remain a freak. As if things couldn't get any worse, while he is sleeping in his poor tent, some men capture him in an attempt to make money off the boy's face. But lucky for him, Fushi shows up to protect him and transforms into the bear, scaring the men away. He explains to Gugu that he wants to become an adult and to do so he needs his help, making Gugu happy. And so Fushi and Gugu have fun scaring the people who tormented him. like two brothers, but after a while, Fushi decides to ask Gugu if he wouldn't go back to the store, and Gugu says that he would never go back, since he was still hurt by the old man. Fushi takes him to his tent, where he discovers that he could reproduce food, discovering that he could reproduce anything that caused him stimulation. Gugu, after eating, tells his story. He lived in a nice house, with comfort and food, parents, 2 sisters and his brother. However, when his father had to move for work, he discovered that this was not really his family and that he and his brother only worked for them. And so the 2 of them are left behind in search of a new job. At this point, Rin shows up asking him to come back to the store, saying that everyone missed him. But Gugu hides from her, ashamed of her face for being without a mask, and Fushi decides to look for the mask, leaving the 2 of them alone. She discovers that Gugu was ashamed of his face because of an accident, and to comfort him, she decides to show him the wound on her arm, which she did not know was caused by the same accident. However, Gugu is disgusted when he realizes that all this time she was ashamed of just a small scar, and says that her little wound was nowhere near as bad as his wound. She then tells him about her real scar, her controlling parents who were always watching her, telling her what she could and could not do, making her feel like a pet in the family. And she says that she wouldn't have had that injury on her arm if it wasn't for her family. Gugu is confused and she explains that she was told that the person who pushed her off the cliff must have been someone who didn't like her parents. Gugu then refuses to tell her what her accident had been like, thinking that she would hate him for what happened. Then Rin respects his decision and hands him another mask to make him more comfortable, and so the 2 go out together in search of Fushi. Meanwhile, Fushi finds Gugu's mask when his creator appears again, asking him to be careful because his enemy was always looking for an opportunity. Gugu and Rin are walking together when suddenly a man grabs her, telling her that her parents had hired him to take her back home. But Gugu saves her and the 2 run away together. Later, she explains that she had run away from home to live her own life without being controlled, and in order not to be found, she had made the mask she had given him. To hide from the people who were looking for her, Gugu gives the mask away, just in time for Fushi to arrive with his old one. He then decides to return to the store with the 2 of them, and so they make their way back. But one of Rin's family's maids recognizes her, and the 3 of them flee into the forest so she won't be caught. To delay the woman, Fushi transforms himself into March, pretending to be an injured little girl, but to his misfortune, his enemy takes the opportunity to attack him. They both find Fushi's delay strange, and Gugu returns to see what had happened, when he finds him wounded on the floor and knocker in the form of March. The creature attacks him, but Fushi defends him and fights the enemy when Gugu tries to fight as well and is thrown away. Fushi, worried about him, becomes distracted and is attacked, losing his boy form. Gugu falls far away and vomits up the drip with the impact of his fall, causing the fire of a torch to spread. He then decides to use this to attack Knocker, but when he returns he realizes that there was nothing left. Gugu then runs to the store to get more booze, as he feels the effects of the drink making him dizzy. But when he finally arrives he sees Rin with her parents. They had found her to take her away against her will. Gugu asks the old man to put more booze in him, explaining that he had to save Fushi. After Pyran understands what has happened, the old man fills his belly with more booze. Gugu then tries to stop Rin's parents from taking her away and finds out that she had run away because her parents had chosen a fiancé for her. Drunk, Gugu begins to talk about how he doesn't know who her fiancé was, but he was sure that no one loved her more than he did. And so he goes back into the forest to save Fushi, but finds only Knocker in the form of a bear. Worried about what had happened, Gugu sets fire to the creature, with everyone watching the confusion in the store. After finally defeating the enemy, he cries for Fushi, when he notices a beam of light going towards a stone. It was Fushi with the only form left. He picks up the stone and his creator appears, reviving Fushi, who returns in his wolf form, and the 2 roll together celebrating their victory. In the morning, the 2 return to the house and everyone has breakfast together. Fushi goes out to get water and meets again with his creator. He tells him to leave that place because if he stays there he will become weak and his enemy will attack again, with new tactics to defeat him. But Fushi refuses to leave, saying he needs Gugu around. So he goes back inside and Rin explains that she has decided she will return to her home and says goodbye to everyone. 4 years later, Gugu had finally grown up and gotten the muscular body he wanted, and Rin shows up at the store. We see that she always comes back there, keeping in touch with everyone. And Fushi, who never had to use any of his abilities again, ended up growing up too and discovering more how to be an ordinary human, with everyone together as a family. With Rin's 16th birthday coming up, she explains to Fushi that she was going to marry a stranger and he comments that Gugu liked her. She then goes out to talk to him when she notices him talking to a stranger, his brother. Gugu's brother finally meets him and explains that he is much better and working and has a more dignified life, and calls Gugu to live with him. But Gugu refuses, after all his brother had abandoned him for all that time, and says that he now has a family with 2 grandparents, Rin and a new brother named Fushi, and would not leave. His brother then apologizes for everything he has done and Gugu leaves. He goes into the store and asks the old man to return the ring that Gugu had given him. Rin then recognizes that this was the ring her father had given her and remembers giving it to a boy some time ago, recognizing that it was Gugu. She then goes to him and asks if he really liked her. Gugu gets nervous and ends up denying it, and she leaves upset. Then the old man arrives to show Gugu his new mask, a sturdier mask that released fire, excellent to use in case a knocker would show up again. Then, Gugu and Fushi go to Rin's birthday party and the old man cries with emotion at seeing how he had grown, considering him as a grandson. Arriving at Rin's mansion, Fushi gives her some vegetables as a gift, while Gugu gives her a purple flower, the same one she was distracted by looking at the day they had their accident. Everyone judges Gugu's choice, thinking she would be sad to remember that day, but Rin is happy to have a gift from him. While everyone is questioning Gugu for wearing a mask at the party, Rin ends up meeting her future fiancé, and Gugu, seeing his loved one with her fiancé, decides to leave the party. She sees him leaving and goes after him, asking again how he had suffered the accident. Gugu then tells her that he fell down a cliff trying to save someone, where a log fell on his head, but he managed to save the girl, who was only left with a small wound on her arm. Rin then gets emotional when she realizes that she is the girl he saved, but before he can say anything, the ground cracks, causing Gugu to fall. Fushi's creator appears to him, telling him that his enemy has returned. Suddenly the whole place starts to collapse, and Fushi asks everyone to run away and turns into a bear to hold the structure together so everyone can get out safely. Meanwhile, Gugu is hanging on to some parts of the knocker until he receives help and manages to be pulled back up. Understanding what was happening, he runs to help Fushi. Inside the mansion he sees that everyone had run away, with only Rin's injured parents left inside, and so Gugu comes out carrying the two just in time for everything to collapse. But before Rin could stop him, Gugu goes back inside to help Fushi, seeing that his friend had returned to the form of the child boy. Knocker appears already in his bear form, but unlike the others, Gugu's fire is useless, as the creature had stone armor. The ground breaks and the two almost fall in the fight, but Fushi uses his skills to make a spear and climb up with the two before they are crushed. They decide together to confront Knocker, trying to find an opening between the stones to locate its core. Gugu then opens a part of the creature and sets it on fire inside, knocking Knocker out. They celebrate their victory, but the creature appears again, killing the March-shaped Fushi. But before it could attack Gugu as well, Rin appears, saving him. The two run away as Fushi comes back to life in boy form and Knocker begins to attack, when he realizes a pain that was not his. Gugu and Rin were under several rocks, and he was wounded holding them so as not to crush them both. He tells her that he loved her, and Rin, crying, opens his mask and kisses him. After this, Fushi feels an even stronger pain, and with the pain, he turns into his friend, realizing that the worst had happened. Gugu was dead. He attacks Knocker with Gugu's form, even though it doesn't work. But when he falls into the water, as the creature was hot, it explodes on impact, and after losing its armor, the core flees far away, taking a part of Fushi with it. Gugu's spirit sees a vision of him with his face healed, and together with his brother, he is reunited with the old men and Rin. Everything was perfect until he misses his brother Fushi and realizes that he was actually dead. He then sees everyone gathered together crying for him and embraces his family. After a while, Fushi decides to leave, so that he doesn't put anyone else in danger, leaving Gugu's brother to take care of things in the store. Rin then wakes up from her party accident, and worried about Gugu she runs to the store. Fushi, unaware that Gugu's spirit was by his side, sees her arriving from afar and despairs because he had no way to explain to her how he had turned back into a boy. Without thinking, he ends up transforming into Gugu, and she is thrilled, thinking Gugu was okay. But when she asks for Fushi, he lies, saying he was dead, taking her to where Gugu had been buried. The girl cries and the old men show up to deliver the things for him to leave, giving Rin the excuse that he was going out to take care of some things. She then hands him her ring, but Fushi, pretending to be Gugu, asks her to keep the ring to remember him, and so he leaves. At night, Rin, around several purple flowers, tells her father that she could not get married, because she was in love with someone else. Her father then says that he would like to meet him, but she cries, explaining that he was no longer there, and we realize that Rin knew that Gugu had died, and that a part of him was with Fushi. Meanwhile, Fushi continued his journey in search of new experiences. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Your support means everything to me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I release new videos, and you'll help me to reach more people with my message. So hit that subscribe button now and let's stay connected.